Welcome back, everyone, to DM Gives Inspiration. Season 9 starts now. As per usual, it'll run 10 episodes and finish up sometime around late November, early December. There's already 80 episodes of this show, but there are still so many learn-to-play topics we can still cover, as well as plenty more inspirations still to discuss. For this first episode of Season 9, we're going to go way back to the basics. One of the most requested topics, and one of the most common questions. How do I read a character sheet? A deceptively complicated question. This episode will be more from the DM's perspective naturally, as this is DM Gives Inspiration, but if you're a new player, you may find this useful as well. This conversation will also focus on the D&D Beyond generated character sheets, as those are the ones that'll be made without your knowledge as DM. As bizarre as it may seem to old-school D&D players and DMs, it is very natural and very modern for a DM to not know how a character sheet works at their first session. After all, you may have learned how to DM from streams, from watching videos online. The player's sheets, what's happening on their end mechanically, is not well broadcast in those sessions. Back in the day, building characters was a rather intimate affair, with the DM right over the player's shoulder, and making sure the numbers ended up in the correct boxes, and verifying the math and mechanics. Nowadays, the players have D&D Beyond, where they can make a character without your undivided attention, or your scrutiny. They can spend as much time as they want in the privacy of their own imagination. Whether they are using the standard build feature with the help text option or the quick build version, they will have their hand held for the duration of their character creation. Your part comes in when they reach the session and they have to make sense of all those numbers and boxes now. And that's what we're going to talk about, because that's your performance, your chance to show your expertise and to assert your dominance on the upcoming game. If this is your first episode, it's not that serious. It's something we talk about quite a bit, though, when it comes to problem players. So it's your first play session. Everyone sits down at the table, whether the table is real or digital, and it's time for you to begin the game. The first thing you want to do to look like a real pro when it comes to character sheets is make sure your spellcasters have actually selected spells. In the character creation process, it is extremely easy to miss the Spells tab. This was hidden off to the side of class features after they selected their class. If the player used the quick build option, they were never even prompted to select spells. They would have to know already how to manage their menus in D&D Beyond. The arcane classes, wizards, warlocks, sorcerers, and bards, and the divine classes, clerics, druids, paladins, and rangers, all select their spells in the exact same way, by clicking the Manage Spells box or going back into the builder and adding spells as part of that class tab. This will keep your new players busy for a while. There's going to be a lot of spells for them to select and read through. At this time, with new players with level 1 characters, I wouldn't recommend min-maxing them. Let them select whatever spells they want. Don't worry about action economy. They can always change their spells later, and you can house rule some sort of event to let your sorcerer change their spells as well. So while that gets going, you should make sure everybody has actually equipped their items. Items on D&D Beyond will not be automatically equipped. Just like spells, you need to take a moment to make sure that everyone knows how to put their armor on. Go to the Inventory tab, scroll down to Equipment, and fill in those boxes. Those items will now be registered as part of their armor class, and their weapons will populate in their Actions tab. And that's it. When it comes to digitally setting up your players, you're done for the day. Make sure they have their items equipped, make sure they actually selected spells. Let's play this game. Your players are heading for the ever-classic Goblin Cavern. There's going to be some combat eventually. Right now, our job is to acquaint them with their characters and the mechanics of playing D&D. They've received their quest, they're walking down the dirt road, they're on the way to the caverns, and they come across an overturned cart and a dead horse. Focus your players in on the middle section, skills. We want everything to be very active right now. We want them to explore their abilities, see what their character's good at, see what they might want to take a chance at being bad at. This is that big list of abilities and numbers right in the center. Acrobatics, animal handling, all the way down to stealth and survival. The numbers on the right show their ability with these skills, what number they would add to a D20 dice roll. On the left, you'll see a series of circles, and some of them are filled in. This is showing if they have proficiency in this skill, if it's something they are naturally good at as part of their class, or they have specialization or training in based on their selections and character creation. We want to really slow down at this cart and let them explore all these options. You can think of yourself like an old text adventure. I want to roll animal handling. The horse is dead. There's nothing to handle. I want to roll stealth. You hide behind the cart, wary of travelers on the road. Was there any reason to hide? No, but this is their first adventure. Let them really stumble through and feel each of these options. Naturally, players will gravitate towards the biggest numbers because they want to win. And that's where you provide assistance. What happened to the horse, one player might say. Prompt them to roll an investigation check, a survival check, maybe even a medicine check. Of those options, they're very likely to select the one that their character is best at, and then you give information flavored on that particular skill. Investigation, their ability to deduce what happened. Survival, maybe they find tracks. Medicine isn't technically used for anything but stabilizing dying players. However, it can be a very cool, flavorful thing to house rule and allow them to see what made the wounds on the horse, perhaps. You should also prompt them to make a perception check around the area. Tell them the things they might see, hear, taste on the air. This would be the perfect time to bring up that babble of a brook, or the splashing, cascading of a waterfall, which of course is right next to your cave. Once they've figured out what they can at the cart, maybe rolled pointless nature checks and went and picked flowers for a little bit, it's time to lead them off the road and down to your goblin cave. The tracks may have done this, the sounds, the perception may have done this. Whatever your players have given you, head down that side path. It may have been a religion check to reveal a goblin totem behind a bush. Either way, they're here to find that goblin cave, and we set them on their way. To the middle left of our skills box, you'll see a box labeled senses. Passive perception, passive investigation, passive insight. As you head into dangerous territory, this is the perfect time to bring up this part of the character sheet. Tell your players these are the numbers you're working with if they're not rolling skills. While they make their way through the rough down your game trail towards the cave, remind your fighter that you're using a 13 passive perception for him. Remind your new sorcerer that you're only using a 10 for her passive perception. If they want to actively make that roll, or any other roll, you can do that as players at any time. All you need to do is ask. And any of those skills that we just did at the card are available to you. If you're curious as DM where these numbers came from, they are merely the skills that are to the right of this box, plus 10. The middle median dice roll on a d20. The players not putting special effort into it roll a 10, and that's their passive ability. They head down the hill. They see the cave, the waterfall we talked about earlier. They'll likely want to make some skill checks now. It's all they know how to do, so let them. Continue to build the tension in the story. It's time to introduce them to saving throws, which are located directly above the senses box there, to the left of our skills. You'll see Stir, Strength, Dex, Con, Int, Wiz, and Cha. These are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. You might note that there's a long line of these stats right above this box. What makes this box special? Proficiency. And now let's talk about that for the DM's benefit. to the right middle between the stats and the walking speed, you will see Proficiency +2 on a level 1 character. Their class gives them proficiency in certain attributes that they're better at. That is represented here in the saving throws. Their proficiency is automatically calculated in. It'll go up based on their level. There's nothing you have to ever do with it. But that proficiency bonus is what's making these skill checks higher than others, saving throws higher than others, and is what is added to weapons that your players are proficient with. More on that in a moment. Here at the entrance of the cave, let's have a big boulder fall down on the first adventurers to try to walk through the door. They make dexterity saving throws to dive out of the way of the boulder. A lot of these saving throws will come up later on in games when players are targeted by spells. For now, let's just get them to roll something on this saving throw modifier list. And dexterity, is the easiest one to express because we all know from movies and life what dodging something looks like. Now that boulder sits in the middle of their doorway. Maybe a player dodged and became trapped inside. Let's make them move the boulder now. Those top numbers now come into play. Strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. In order to move a boulder, rules as written, they need to make a strength check. Athletics is really only supposed to be used for climbing, jumping, swimming, and that sort of thing. For now, keep things simple. Let's just have players take turns moving the boulder. In another session, you can introduce them to the idea of the help action. With the passageway clear, your players head inside, and naturally they're gonna want to be stealthy. Someone at least in the party is gonna want to be stealthy, so we go back to that middle box, find stealth, and the party rolls stealth individually. This is a great time to remind anybody, or at least check in on your players, to see if they have a small D by their stealth skill. Heavier armors such as chainmail or plate mail clink together and make it harder to be stealthy. Disadvantage on stealth, roll 2 d20s, take the lower. A flavorful moment as well, as you head into the dark cave that's been building up to this point. We're at about hour 2 likely with questions from players and our own stumble-throughs, so it's time for a small skirmish. Check out Season 6, Episode 2, March Order and Surprise for more information on how to run a stealthy party. For now, your party was either successful in being stealthy, or they weren't. Whoever was the loudest gave away the gig, and a goblin charges your party. If they were successful, they go into the cave, and in the first room they find a goblin eating some ill-gotten gains off the cart, and they attack them. Now we roll initiative, which is located there below proficiency, right above the big actions box that we're about to get to. The players, and perhaps the goblin, roll initiative, you put them in order, and the turns begin, starting with the player who got the highest initiative. This is where the tour of our character sheet is at its most complicated and intimidating. But stay with me, because we're really just trying to teach them one basic lesson. What is their action economy? What do they get to do during their combat turn? They have movement, 1 action, and 1 bonus action. The fighter gets the first turn. He wants to approach the goblin. The speed which he can move is located right above our action box here. Above armor class, it says walking 30-foot speed. Now your player may think to themselves, I'm not walking, I'm running. Doesn't matter. For a movement action, they can move the speed of 30 feet, 6 squares on a normal grid in D&D. So for the sake of learning here, naturally your goblin would be put right within their movement speed. We can teach dash actions another time. This is about the character sheet. Movement, spend, runs up to the goblin, wants to make an attack. The Actions tab is currently set to all by default. Encourage them to set it to Action. They will see those weapons they equipped earlier listed below. They complete their attack, they deal damage, or they miss. Next, encourage them to find something to do with their bonus action, which might be nothing, but it's really important to bring up. The next tab over, bonus actions, for the fighter will say two-weapon fighting, and describe what happens when they want to use an off-handed weapon. You might need to remind them that they're currently using a shield, and they cannot make this attack, but it's such an important moment to teach action economy. Next are goblin attacks, introducing our players to where their armor class is, which is right next to initiative above our actions box here. Our fighter has 18. If it hits, it would be minus from the hit points in the top right of the character sheet. For this fight, we want to stay very toe-to-toe. The goblin continues to engage in an I hit you, you hit me fashion. Everybody's learning right now. Next up, the sorcerer. The big switch here is to make sure you explain that casting a spell is an action. Otherwise, it's the exact same run-through. Movement to where they want to go, casting a spell as the action, and then a bonus action if they have one. Before you move on, make sure they spent the spell in their spell slots, or if they used a cantrip, it didn't cost any spell slots. These are located in the spell tab on the right side, next to the level of the spell. When it's not their turn, encourage your players to click on the Features and Traits tab and just read everything they can about their characters. Find out all the little specialty math that is being done in the background so they can be the best fighter, ranger, whatever they can be. The subsequent encounters after this first fight are the perfect time to teach dash actions, reactions, be it attacks of opportunity or other abilities, other types of saves. Introduce your players to everything you can across the character sheet. Your first session should be inspired by the abilities your players have so you can trigger as many of them as possible. And take advantage of those smaller tabs. Don't just look at actions as a whole. Select the attack action, the bonus action. Select what you're looking for. In features and traits, divide it into class features and racial features so that text is smaller and your brain can comprehend it. Most of those features are on the player and the DM to recognize. D&D Beyond doesn't know if you're flanking somebody. For the sake of this very first adventure, make that spiral around the character sheet again. We investigate the room. Skills. We adventure onward. Senses. A trap triggers. Saving throws. An obstacle is in our way. Ability checks. And then combat yet again, where you can introduce more mechanics, such as attacks of opportunity or dash actions. There is so much more information hidden on this character sheet, and we'll be tackling some of that on the next episode, talking about weapon types. Here on a quick build level 1 character or on a custom build level 1 character, equipment takes care of you quite easily. But what makes weapons different? Why can they only equip some? And what are the special abilities of some of our mundane items? We'll talk about that next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of DM Gives Inspiration. If this was your first episode, welcome to you. Enjoy the back catalog that goes over so many other topics concerning 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. If you'd like to support this show, you can do so over at patreon.com/Kyle Fergusson, 2 S's in Fergusson. And I'll see you all next week as we continue Season 9 of DM Gives Inspiration.